G'day and welcome back to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, I'm going to show you how to adjust tappets on your classic Mini. Alright, so adjusting tappets is an essential part of any classic vehicle or a vehicle that has adjustable tappets. Generally, as they wear, the tappet clearance gets larger, which then causes them to rock and become noisy like this. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to adjust it with basic tools and something you can do at home. Alright, so first step you generally need to do is determine whether the vehicle needs to be hot or cold when adjusting them. Good thing about classic Minis is that you can adjust them when they're either hot or cold, but in our instance, we're going to do it when it's stone cold. I've got the engine out of grace at the moment. I'm currently in the middle of doing a couple upgrades, which if you haven't already, make sure to check it out on my video series. So the first step we need to do is remove the rocker cover itself. So I've removed it, I've taken the old gasket off, and now we need to work out how to adjust them. There are different methods in which you can adjust them, but I'm going to show you the easiest method that you can do without having too much mechanical knowledge. Alright, so the rocker clearance that we're going to be adjusting is this here. So between the top of the valve and the rocker arm itself. So this is the valve spring, the valve is actually here, this is the rocker arm, that's the rocker shaft that runs all the way through there, and then we have our tappet adjustment. So in our case, we have the push rod, which is connected to the back of the rocker arm via a ball joint, or a type of ball joint, I guess. And then we have a lock nut at the top, along with an adjustment here. So what we need to do is get a set of feeler gauges, put it in between that gap just down in here. Then we need to adjust the clearance. So as you can see, this one here isn't too bad compared to this one, which is significantly worse. So incorrectly adjusted tappets is going to cause excessive noise, but also it's going to cause poor performance of the engine. Alright, so like I said, there are several different methods in which you can adjust the tappets, but I'm going to show you the easiest method I find to use. So what I like to do is either take the spark plugs out, or we're going to leave them in our case, just so I can demonstrate this. What we're going to be doing is we need to line up each of the rockers. So we need to be able to turn the crankshaft. So long as you have access to your crankshaft pulley, you'll be able to turn it. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the crankshaft until we find that this arm is rocking and is no longer acting on the top of the valve. So what I mean by rocking is that it is doing essentially this. It is at the low point of the lobe. It is not the high point. It is not lifting the valve. So we're going to turn the engine over until we find that sweet spot where we have maximum clearance just here. All right, so what we need is a 1 5/16 socket to turn the crankshaft. So what we're going to be now doing is turning it until we see the valve start to open. Once it's opened, we then know that it has reached maximum lift when it stops. So as you can see, it's now opening the valve. It's pushing it all the way down. Terrific. Once it hits the bottom, it'll then get to a point where it'll start to come back up. Now that pressure inside the cylinder is just the compression, so that's not a drama, and that's not an issue either. So now that it's stopped, we now know the valve or the rocker arm is rocking. So this is when we have maximum clearance. So now we need to loosen this lock nut and adjust it through the top here. Alright, next step is to loosen the lock nut here. So I do have a 1/2 inch spanner, and we're just going to loosen that nut. Now you don't need to loosen it a lot, you just need to be able to loosen it about 1/4 to 1/2 of a turn. Make sure that it's able to be moved in the middle. So now this is our adjustment just here. What we need to do is also grab a set of feeler gauges. Now a set of feeler gauges will only cost $20-30 depending where you go from, or get them from, should I say. I've got a set of Blue Point ones. A really good Tomo's tech tip here is to make sure that it has both imperial and metric specifications on there. I'll just see if I can get the camera to show it. Not sure if it will. Anyway, this one is 0.016 and then the bottom is 0.406. Now it also denotes both imperial and metric measurements. So we're setting these to 16th thou. So 0.016 of an inch. What we need to be now doing is fitting it between the top of the valve and the rocker arm itself. So see how that goes in there quite easily? We need that to be a little bit firmer. Now this is a skill that you need to learn by doing the job again and again and again to be able to learn how tight it needs to be. Essentially, you don't want this thing, sorry if you can just see me, it's just a bit glary in the workshop. What you want to do is learn how tight this needs to be. You want to be able to put the feeler gauge in and it move in there quite firmly, but not so firm that you're pushing all your might on there, but also not so easy that you can just slide it straight in and out. It's one of those things that, just like an adjustment of a rear wheel bearing, you need to learn to do over time, and the only way you learn to do it is either by being shown or doing it yourself, and then just learning how to feel, that sort of thing. So like I said before, a lot of things that you do as a mechanic, you got to learn to do by finger, because a lot of time you can't actually see what you're doing. You just have to do everything by feel. All right, so next step is to make the adjustment. We're going to grab our feeler gauge, we're going to slide it in here, and then we're going to grab a flat blade screwdriver. Now what I like to do is wind that all the way in until essentially the feeler gauge is quite stiff to move. Now I just need to loosen that nut off just a little bit because it was stopping before I was able to get the full adjustment. So essentially now that's too hard. If I loosen that off, that's now too loose. So like I said, it's just about learning how tight things need to be. So it needs to be firm to push in, but not overly tight. So just keep adjusting it bit by bit until you find that perfect measurement. All right, so I'm happy with that. Now, once you have it in position, you want to keep that screwdriver fitted to the adjustment nut. You then want to grab your spanner. You want to make sure that the screwdriver doesn't move at all, but only the nut does. Once you then tighten it, triple check your clearance, and then move on to the next one. So we remove the screwdriver, check the clearance, yep, that's perfect. So like I said, that's not super tight, but I can also remove it and put it back in there. So that is a perfect fit. So in order to get the other ones, what we now need to do is do the exact same thing all over again. We need to rotate the crankshaft and adjust each one individually until all the specifications are met. Now, some cars do have different specifications, as I said, either hot or cold, meaning that you're gonna have to get the car to operating temperature in order for the adjustments to be made. Now, some cars also have two different measurements for not only just being hot and cold, but also inlet and exhaust. So it is worthwhile noting to make sure that you get the right ones to suit the exact application that you're doing. So you don't want to set them all to the same thickness, simply because it won't run to its optimum performance. So you need to work out which one's inlet and which one's exhaust. Some manufacturers tell you to do it in a particular sequence, but I literally just start at number 1 and work my way all the way through to number 8 until they're all adjusted. When they're all adjusted, make sure you then reassemble everything, put the rocker cover back on. Once it's done, start up, make sure there's no oil leaks, and if you're happy, send it on its way. That's the episode, guys. Pretty straightforward, very basic, very short episode, but it is a necessity when adjusting tappets on a classic vehicle or even a modern day vehicle if it has it. The Morris behind me, as you can see, it does have those as well, so I'll be doing those in the build. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the series that I've done in my channel. So guys, like always, stay COVID safe. We'll see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups.